Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice, social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Cancel Vacation in paperback and e-readers today. One of my viewers wanted me to talk about communism. Now, when it comes down to your communism, most of these young kids think that it's the big thing. However, as somebody who has studied history, I can tell you that communism is a disaster from day one. Now, those who believe in communism have this ideal that everybody will get the same equal share from an entity known as the state. However, the state is made up of people, and people have a sin nature that's born in them from the fall of Adam and Eve, and it's that fall from grace that leads to these people having that sin nature that makes them their own worst enemy. Now, your communism has the ideal that everyone will have the same equal amount of resources provided to them by the state, and that the state owns all of the property. However, again, the state is composed of individuals, and because the state is composed of individuals, these individuals have a sin nature, and this sin nature leads to them becoming greedy. So you can have a system that talks about allocating equal resources to people, but man's own sin nature will ensure that he is going to take more for himself if he is in positions of power than those who are supposed to get equal shares. So basically, your communist is just working against themselves, talking about how they want to make everything equal, but in actuality, there are going to be people behind the scenes who will always make sure that they get more for themselves, and they are going to go out here and get that more for themselves because that's just the way greedy people are. Now, one of the big faults of your communism is the fact that they have this notion that people are good, but the whole thing is the Bible clearly states that man is evil, and Jesus, the Son of God, has already told you how evil man is because he was there when he saw man fall, when he committed that sin by eating the forbidden fruit. So he's already seen the evil nature of man, but you have these men out here who want to promote this idea of communism, and they want to promote this idea of so-called fairness. But in reality, life is not fair, and men with a sin nature, when they do get an advantage, they are going to take that advantage, and they're going to use that advantage to benefit themselves. So with your communists, you have people with ideals who think that they're going to make everything fair, but on the inside, their very same innate nature is going to make it where they want to take advantage in situations. So you'll have people in a communist system talking about, oh, it's all for the collective, but the whole thing is individuals who make up the state are not interested in the collective needs of anyone. No, they are interested in only the needs of the individual, and they are always going to try to gain advantage or benefits for themselves, and they're going to do this because it benefits them. Now, your people who promote communism, they sit there and talk about ideals of the state owning everything and controlling everything, and then ensuring that everybody gets a fair share and that everybody in the commune will have equal shares. And that's a nice ideal, but it is not the reality. And again, when you have human nature where people are naturally evil and naturally greedy, what happens is that somebody is always going to want more, and those who are in power, they are going to take more because they are in charge and because they are in control of the books as related to everything. They are going to go out here and take extra for themselves and then write it like it was never there. That is what happened in the USSR over the course of 70 years, and that is what's happening in places like North Korea right now. There is no way to go out here and deal with these types of people because, again, the nature of man is evil and not everybody is good. Now, the other part of your communist that falls completely apart is your communist saying that nobody owns anything. Now, if nobody owns anything, no one has an incentive to take care of anything. And in your places where your communism is, places are decrepit and rotten. And the reason why those places are decrepit and rotten is because since nobody owns anything, nobody has an incentive to make sure that property is maintained, and nobody has an incentive to gain any sort of wealth by improving said property because the state owns the property, and because the state owns the property, people have no sense of responsibility for anything. So a communist will sit there and say, oh, that the pipes are broken in a building, but they'll say the state's job to fix it. But a property owner, they have a obligation to go out here and do something about it because they don't want to lose money on rent. So they don't want to lose revenue, so that's why they'll fix their property. But a communist has no incentive to go and do so. Now, an example of this can be shown to you based on places like Section 8 housing and the housing projects all across the country. All of those are state-sponsored housing, and oftentimes they are in bad cases of disrepair. And the reason why they're in bad cases of disrepair is because, one, the tenants do not own any of that property, and two, the state has no incentive to fix that property because it is state-owned, and the state is not an individual. The state is an entity unto itself, and the state has no incentive to do anything because the state has nobody that it competes with for that property. And that is the other problem with communism. It destroys competition, and when you destroy competition, what happens is people have no incentive to improve their lives. They have no incentive to do better. They have no incentive to try harder. They have no incentive to push and persevere because they know that the state is going to continue to take care of them. And as long as the state is taking care of them, they have no reason to try to do better because all they're looking for are the crumbs from the communist table, and those crumbs are their daily bread. So they have no incentive to go out here and look for a different flavor of bread, or even try to go out here and make their own bread from the flour, yeast, and other supplies that are given to them, or to even start a business because businesses are punished under the communist state because only products you can buy are state-sponsored products. So people have no incentive to do better, so basically they give up. And we can see examples of that in black communities where people who are a part of the welfare state, they sit in state-sponsored housing and they practically do nothing in spite of being given training programs and college grants. They will sit there for years, and what will happen is they will go and try to keep the same apartment, recertifying, and then their children will go and take over said apartment and stay in poverty. So instead of people having incentives to step up and do better and move themselves forward, people stay in the same place. But what is scary about communism is it takes an entire nation and keeps it in the same place, and that country goes nowhere, like Cuba has practically gone. Your Cuba is basically stuck in the 1950s as related to architecture, and stuck in the 1950s as related to economic conditions. And with over 70 years passing, your Cuba is still stuck in the past. Same thing with your North Korea, still stuck in the 60s and the 50s, because nobody has an incentive to go out here and do better, and nobody has an incentive to go out here and compete. Now, what's really troubling about these countries is that you have people here in America who look at it as an ideal, and they're thinking, oh, this type of economic system will benefit them. But all you have to do is go to a black community, and you will see the impact of communism on a people right here in America. Because here in America, we have a lot of people out here, they are stuck with a communist mindset, thinking that the only way, they're afraid of the state, because you have mothers who are afraid of the welfare state, afraid of Section 8 recertification specialists, afraid of the government, and that leads to people not looking to go out here and try to do better, and it leads to people sitting in dilapidated housing, sitting there frustrated and angry because their lives are going nowhere, and as their lives go nowhere, they participate in violence against each other because they feel like they are stranded in a world that is going nowhere. And that's what happens with your communist countries. It's a place where nothing is going anywhere, and you have people at the top caught up in their ideals, ignoring the real pain of real people. And these people, like your leftists who are in places like your Bronx and other inner city neighborhoods, they are disconnected and detached from the people that they serve, and those people just vote for them because they just feel like they have no other choice. And that is what life is like under a communist system. Your communists, it's a place where people at the top abuse people at the bottom, and they all talk about the ideal of equal, but there's nothing equal, because your man has a natural sin nature that is evil, and with that natural evil sin nature, oftentimes it's his greed that winds up corrupting that communist system. And what happens is that communist system winds up falling apart, like Russia and the USSR's communist system did back in 1989. Finally, the system wound up collapsing under the weight of so much corruption that the entire communist system of the great United Soviet Socialist Republic wound up collapsing, because all of the people who were supposed to be good and looking out for the best interest of the people, they wound up becoming so corrupt that they wound up undermining all of the ideals that they promoted. And the reality was that eventually the government could not sustain itself because there were no good people in that government from day one. And again, it proves the point of God that man's nature is evil, and because his nature is evil and he is filled with sin, he will always undermine himself in any sort of system, because he talks about the ideal of things being good, but he is not good himself. So to sit there and say that, oh, the communist system will work, like many of your people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many others believe, that's just complete foolishness, because corrupt people, again, are eventually going to take over, abuse people, abuse their power, and they're going to take advantage of people because nobody holds these people accountable under a system like communism, because the state is not an individual, and because the state is not an individual, nobody holds anybody accountable for anything. And what happens is people like communism because they don't want accountability, they don't want responsibility, and they don't want an incentive to go out here and do better. It basically is an economic system that is designed around failure, and those who follow it are destined to fail, just like those in the Soviet Socialist Republic and those who are struggling in Cuba, and like many right here in America in the inner cities of the ghetto. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can do so on Amazon.com. In paperback and Kindle format, you can also find books on Smashware's The iBookstore and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle, Stop Simping in Cyberspace. Learn how to avoid predatory females like Instagram models and e-girls in their virtual con games with Stop Simping in Cyberspace. Get your copy of Stop Simping in Cyberspace in paperback and Kindle today.